coverage from there. Trey, what have you heard?
Bill, good morning. We're following this breaking news out of Kabul right now. Reports of an explosion outside of the Abbey Gate, one of the main three gates on the ground there at the airport in Kabul. Remember, there were thousands of people lining up over the past several days trying to get out of the country, not just Afghan civilians, but also foreign nationals, including American and British citizens. ISIS-K, though, a small organization in eastern Afghanistan. The K stands for Khorasan province in eastern Afghanistan. This is an offshoot of the Islamic State that started back in 2014, and they were responsible for a lot of attacks in Afghanistan, especially from 2015 to 2017. Some reports indicate upwards of 250 attacks, both shooting and explosive attacks against Afghan and Pakistani civilians during that time period. Now, the Afghan security forces, when they were in control of the country, oftentimes would launch operations against this group. We saw images in recent months in cities like Jalalabad, Afghanistan, where they were able to come in and take out many of these extremist fighters. But again, over the past several days, we heard concern from not only American but also British intelligence officials about this group ISIS-K, a very small but strong organization when it comes to these extremist attacks. And there were specific threats. This led the U.S. State Department and what's left of the embassy in Kabul operating out of the airport there to urge Americans simply to shelter in place. They had been issuing these orders every so often over the past week following the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan because there were concerns that Americans and any civilians could be targeted on their way to the airport or outside these gates. Remember, when we look at these types of attacks, you have a large group of civilians in one area. You also have foreign soldiers, including Americans, outside of these gates trying to keep some sense of order. And this was the exact piece of a possibility that U.S. officials were concerned about. Part of the reason we heard the Pentagon and the Department of Defense try to ramp up these evacuations in recent days. In the past 24 hours, more than 13,000 people evacuated. That according to the DOD. And also that brings the total to about 95,000. Certainly some progress, but we do know there were those thousands of people outside of the gates of the airport. And when you hear these reports of an explosion and then small arms fire, you have to think about where this was located. We were on the ground on Sunday in Kabul, and as we were there, you could hear gunfire in the distance. There was smoke rising up from the horizon. The area around the airport was secure to an extent where the perimeter was established by the Americans, but beyond that, it was pretty much no man's land. And that was the area where U.S. intelligence officials were specifically concerned that not Taliban fighters, but ISIS-K militants could simply walk up to a crowd of people like we saw these images and then detonate some sort of device. We don't know a lot of details specifically about this story as it's developing as we speak, but reports on the ground do indicate an explosion, a large explosion outside of the Abbey Gate at the Kabul airport happening just this hour, and reports of multiple people injured as a result. Bill?
Thank you, Trey.